This is the Badger247 podcast with your host, Evan Flood.
Get your seatbelt on, buckle up, because we got a show today. We got to go in on Wisconsin's 52-21 loss to Ohio State Saturday. I know you all saw the game. It wasn't that close. That scoreline of 52-21 is doing Wisconsin some justice without a doubt because they were not competitive whatsoever. You knew about 3 or 4 plays into that game, the Badgers were in some major trouble. What does this loss mean in the grand scheme of things? Where do the Badgers go from here? We'll touch on that and a lot more. We also got new Wisconsin commit Nolan Winters going to hop on the show. He's going to break down his commitment. He gave some fantastic stuff about what was a very heated recruitment between Minnesota and Wisconsin. He ultimately opts to cross the border and play for the Badgers, so he'll talk about his decision. First things first, we got to put a bow on this Ohio State loss. I'm sure some of you are tired of even thinking about it at this point, but this kind of turns out to be a crossroads for the program, I think. Is this just a rough patch for Paul Chryst and Wisconsin that they eventually get out of? This rough patch being really since the 2018 season or end of 2019, depending on where you want to draw that line. I'm not going to recap the game. You all saw it. Like I said, most of you are probably sick of even thinking about it. And main goal of this podcast has been to not waste anyone's time. What you care about right now is whether or not Paul Chryst should be the head coach of Wisconsin after this season. And if you're in what feels like a minority of this shouldn't even be discussed, then you definitely still care as to whether or not the Badgers are on a downward trajectory. If you already read my column on Sunday, I apologize. This is probably going to be a little repetitive for you. I'm going to try and touch on some other things I didn't. So like I said, not wasting your time. But as I said in the piece, for the first time, I think it is a valid conversation about how warm the seat of Paul Chryst should be. I'm not in the fire him camp. Let me put that out there again. I'm not a what have you done for me lately type of guy. Obviously, the last 3 seasons or two and a quarter now hold more weight, and they should. But we're still talking about a guy that has the program viewed as the premier team in the Big Ten West. Not saying they're the best team in the Big Ten West this season, but they are viewed as the premier brand. He's 6-1 in bowl games. There have certainly been worse times in the Barry Alvarez era, in the Brett Bielema era. Chryst has also had maybe the best season we've ever seen, at least in my lifetime, from a Wisconsin head coach. Going 13-1 in 2007, 1 score away, maybe even 1 bad call away from beating Ohio State and earning the program's first ever trip to the college football playoff. Obviously, Brett Bielema had that 12-1 year, but they didn't really beat anybody until the Capital One Bowl against Arkansas, and they were still ranked 12th in the country, I think. Chryst has that huge win over Miami in their own stadium to hang his hat on for that season, which I think gives him the edge. And that win felt like it was going to be a program elevator. Not that 2017 should be the bar for this program, but if you remember 2018, they came in with just unbelievable hype. What did they start? 3rd in the country. They had a lot back from that 13-1 team and fell very, 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 very short of expectations. It wasn't that long ago where this program was knocking on the door of contending with the Blue Bloods. You could start to see the top of that mountain. Not that Wisconsin was going to be considered one of those teams, but it felt like they got to a point where they belonged on the same field, and it didn't have to be these seasons where everything fell into place for them to compete. It felt like they could do it somewhat regularly. So what's brought me to all of a sudden, maybe we should have a discussion about potential drastic measures at the head coaching position? Being in Columbus Saturday night, for the first time since that 2014 Big Ten championship game, I looked at UW and I said, they don't belong on the same field as this team. Did anybody expect the Badgers to win? Absolutely not. But that thing looked like a varsity versus a JV team. Even the punter didn't show up and was having the roughest game of his career. You know things are really bad when you can't even rely on a guy to give you consistent 40-yard punts at a minimum. There have been rough losses over the past couple seasons, but in the Christ era, this was the only one I looked at and just thought, Wisconsin can't beat this team. It doesn't matter if Ohio State has an off night and the Badgers have their best night. They're not in the same league as this team. I think this is the first time I've ever openly talked about a coaching change. And for the record, again, I wouldn't do anything right now. No way. And for all the people on social media or message boards trying to get it started, I think you're completely wasting your time. There's no way in hell they would ever do anything mid-season. I know that. But for me, Saturday night was a huge red flag. Huge. And like I said, I will 99 out of 100 times probably come to a coach's defense. I certainly will never want to be leading that sort of charge. So when you've lost me to some extent, I think you've got some problems, because that is not my MO whatsoever. Even things were going really bad in the Greg Gard era, I was looking for the light at the end of the tunnel. And I saw a lot more positive things coming. I'm not ever going to write anybody off, and I'm not going to write this team off, because I know there's talent in that room. But that's part of what really concerns me. I mean, you just had 3 of your best recruiting classes, the best in school history in terms of the internet rankings era. I know that's not end-all, be-all. I know I cover recruiting, but I'm never going to push that narrative, especially for a program like Wisconsin, who's done more with less than maybe anybody in the country. But for once, you've started taking some players away from these blue blood schools, and a lot of them were on the field Saturday night. Yet that gap between Ohio State and Wisconsin looked as big as ever. That 2014 Big Ten championship game obviously was worse. A lot of things were going on that season. I think there's a lot more that we don't even know about. Obviously Gary Anderson was out the door the next day. There were feuds going on in the locker room with him and the players we all know about. And the Badgers ended up getting boat raced 59-0. Saturday night, you've got a competent offense now. The defense, it's not as good as it's been the past couple seasons, but it's still top 15, top 20 nationally, probably. As I previously mentioned, you've upgraded talent across a lot of different positions. There is no reason why that game should have been over with 13:33 left in the second quarter. Ohio State's up 28-0. Wisconsin's got 23 total yards at that point. And frankly, it was probably over as soon as Ohio State scored that first touchdown, when they averaged 17 yards per play on that drive. So you can't write this team off. And we've seen this story before where the schedule softens up, Wisconsin starts rolling through the Big Ten West. The problem is they tend to get everyone's hopes up, and then that letdown comes either the regular season finale or a Big Ten championship game. But you can't write this team off, because they are still pretty talented. But that's what's so concerning about Saturday night. How does that happen? Again, nobody expected you to win, but how are you that flat in a primetime game under the lights? Wisconsin should have been the more desperate, hungrier team. They had already come in with a loss. Ohio State had a ton of reasons to overlook Wisconsin. They had won 8 straight in the series. Wisconsin hadn't won in Columbus since 2004. Like I said, the Badgers had already lost a game this season. Buckeyes, had also kind of been a little sloppy in September, and then they've had a history of doing that. If you're going to catch them, a lot of times you catch them early. They weren't great against Notre Dame. They gave up 21 to Toledo. Wisconsin's not good. They're good. I still think they're good, like I said, but they're not good enough to be out-toughed and out-coached by that wide a margin and expect to compete with Ohio State. Ohio State, with all that talent, especially on the offensive side of the ball, they're going to get theirs. Sometimes you can play perfect defense and it doesn't matter. But the stuff you can control wasn't there for the Badgers. The things that they can dictate and that Ohio State can't take away from them, a lot of the things this program was built on weren't there Saturday night. The other thing I can't wrap my head around, and maybe it was just because the game got so out of hand so quickly that we didn't get to see it, but how are you planning on winning that game? What did you come out and do that was going to rattle Ohio State? Wisconsin, first series shows the Wildcat. Now look, I'll give Paul Chryst and Bobby Ingram credit for trying to mix things up. I think I used the word innovative in one of my post-game content pieces, and someone called me out on that. Right. That was a bad choice of words. That's not innovative. I guess maybe on Wisconsin's, for this season, it's sort of innovative for Wisconsin, but in the grand scheme of things, I mean, even the Badgers have used it before in previous seasons. But it was a different wrinkle. But that's not a strategy that's going to carry you to the finish line. At best, you're probably hoping to catch them off guard for a couple plays, then they adjust. It probably doesn't work anymore. And for the most part, that's what happened. Defensively, that's where the real concerns were. Again, you knew Wisconsin was going to give up some points. They probably had to score 24-28 minimum to win that game if the defense does what it's capable of. Jim Leonard, hell of a lot smarter than me, probably forgotten more about football than I'll ever know. I don't, but doesn't necessarily mean that I'm wrong. And obviously what he was doing didn't work. I can't wrap my head around some of the throwing lanes that they gave C.J. Stroud all night. It felt like there was not a Wisconsin defender anywhere in the vicinity. I thought you could pull a fan out of the stands who had average arm strength and could have potentially picked apart that Wisconsin defense from where I'm sitting. I mean, they were third and shorts. They weren't even close to these guys. Wisconsin opted to sit in that zone early and let Stroud get comfortable. Turned out to be a huge mistake. Now, I know where Leonard was going with it. He saw Notre Dame kind of do the same thing, and to an extent, it worked. Notre Dame had the strategy of keep everything in front of them. They'll give up some sizable gains here or there, but they were trying to avoid the big play. And for the most part, Ohio State wasn't able to really pick them apart in the medium game, at least not going up and down the field. They only scored 21 points, and Notre Dame was in that for 4 quarters. I think had a lead in the third as well. So I understand where you were going with it. What I hate in big games sometimes is when you try and do things that are outside of what's made you successful in the past. And for Wisconsin's defense, what they've hung their hat on is creating pressure in the front seven, so your back end, which typically can't match up with an Ohio State in terms of how many receivers they can put on the field and how many big play threats, you don't want them covering for a very long time. You want your front seven causing havoc. And when you sit back in these soft zones, you're afraid to get after C.J. Stroud because he's got some legs and ability to escape the pocket. Nights like Saturday happen. The Badgers did absolutely nothing to make that guy uncomfortable. I thought after the first drive where they marched almost the length of the field, 88 yards and 6 plays and about 245, you should have scrapped that zone and went back to what you do. So Wisconsin ends up finishing with 0 sacks, 0 tackles for loss, and 0 quarterback hurries. The 52 points were the most they allowed since that 2014 Big Ten championship game. Ohio State could have put up 800 yards that night if they wanted to. Wisconsin didn't even get a stop till there was under 7 minutes left in the third quarter, and they needed a holding call by Ohio State to get it. The last troubling part I'll touch on, honestly ask yourself, what was the most encouraging part of that game? I mean, yeah, Braylon Allen had a 75-yard run late. Didn't matter. Didn't mean anything. John Torchio, interception, big hit. Again, late in the game, it was already over. Wisconsin's lost a lot of big games, 1-9 in their last 10 against top 20 opponents. They've even had some lopsided losses. But you've been able to point to some things that give you encouragement, or some players that certainly held their own. I'm trying to think what went right for the Badgers in that game. What was the best part? Nate Van Zel scoring 3 for 3 on PATs? A 38-yard kickoff return by Isaac Garendo? Wisconsin's offensive line only gave up 1 sack, but Graham Mertz was dealing with a lot of pressure the whole night and could never really sit back there and dissect the defense. Was his scrambling the best part? Because he was able to evade some guys on a couple occasions, do some nice scrambling, throw on the run. I mean, he had some nice moments from that aspect. Either way you want to go with it, unless I'm missing something, we're talking about very minuscule things. So that's all I got to say about Ohio State. In this next segment, we're going to talk about Christ, his job, and can they turn it around. All right, so I already mentioned Wisconsin 1-9 in their last 10 games against top 20 opponents. We know that trend. For the third straight season, Wisconsin is 500 or worse after 4 games. So you got that going for him, I should say against him too. After the game, Chris was asked about what his message would be to the fans who are upset about the direction of the program. Didn't exactly dodge the question, but I wouldn't say answered it either.
Well, I mean, my message to our team is, we don't want to be where we're at right now, but we've got an opportunity to go forward. And, I care about our fans, but what I care most about is our team. And I feel good about the group of guys that I get to be around and coach and appreciate, and feel good about the staff that get to work with. And I get people not being happy with where we're at right now. They're no more disappointed than I think anyone in the program is. But I also know that, we come back and we got to go. We got to bounce back from this stuff, and that's part of it. And want to have a team that people are proud of, right? But biggest concern is getting our guys to play good football.
So I don't know if that makes you feel better or not, but that was his answer. Before I go forward, I think we should put everything into perspective here. Twitter, sometimes message boards, I think ours is okay, but especially Twitter is not an accurate representation of this fan base. It's certainly not an accurate representation of the rational fans. Right? Like, if I go into public and people want to start talking Badgers, I don't get the same answers. Twitter is a hostile, hyperbolic place. So you can be in the majority there. But I think it's easy to forget that a lot of people aren't on that. And those people are generally the ones filling Camp Randall Stadium and cheering their butts off. Win, lose, or draw. So the people that want him gone, no ifs, ands, or buts, just sit down. Because you do this after every loss. You did it with Guard too. You got to have a little patience. You definitely got to see how this season plays out. Now, if he loses to Illinois Saturday, or Wisconsin loses to Illinois Saturday, yeah, you got a real problem. That seat's on fire. But there's a lot of season left. A lot can still happen. This isn't to the point of no return. And I do think Wisconsin's got a staff capable of turning things around, capable of getting it back to where this program was just 5 years ago. But obviously the other end of the spectrum is, okay, well, why isn't it happening then? Why haven't the wake-up calls from 2020 and 2021 resonated with them? Why are things continuing to get worse? Here's where I think there's some validation to what the fans who believe in drastic measures are necessary, that crowd, where I think they have some real momentum going. And why that movement is growing louder, especially from, I don't read a lot of tweets. I try and stay off Twitter as much as possible, especially when things aren't going well mid-game. But there are people, I see who responds to me. Names, they come up, and I know I've seen them before. There are some names that I didn't think ever would be in this crowd, and they're now in it. That movement is growing. There's no question about it. One of the things I sort of like to pride myself on is having a pulse for the fan base. So when I wrote that piece on Christ and, where things were going, I just like to see how much negative feedback I got. I don't think I got any. I don't think I got any pushback from anybody. If I'm wrong on that, I'm sorry, but, when I checked, I didn't see anybody arguing with me. And to have a consensus like that, especially on Twitter where everyone's down each other's throats half the time, it kind of made me chuckle a little bit. Because when's the last time, people agree on anything these days, right? So that kind of raised my eyebrows a bit. But back to what I was saying, I got off track there a little bit. Where the movement, I think, is gaining traction is it's just going to only get harder for a program like Wisconsin to win like they did in 2016, 2017. You got NIL. That's going to be a real thorn in their side. I don't care what Wisconsin has set up. They're not going to be able to compete financially with the Blue Bloods and a lot of those second-tier down programs. They're just not. So your recruiting's going to take a hit, most likely. You're going to have to do as good of a job as you were doing finding those diamonds in the rough. You're going to have to do an even better job. Because even some of those guys are getting some stuff, let me tell you. In a couple years, you've also got USC and UCLA joining this conference. We obviously don't know how they're going to break up the divisions, but seemingly this advantage that you've had in the West is going to go bye-bye. Even if it's just adding those two Pac-12 schools to the West and then, say, send Purdue and Illinois to the East, you're taking away two likely wins off your schedule and throwing two, I don't know if I'd call them toss-up games. UCLA can obviously vary year to year. USC under Lincoln Riley will probably get scary here if they're not already. Either way, you don't chalk those W's up on your schedule the way you did with those two other teams that, may go west. They could obviously just scrap East and West and try and balance them out as even as possible. Hopefully they don't name it Leaders and Legends or something stupid if they're not going to go with a geographical approach. Third, Wisconsin used to be able to win ugly. With these offenses in college football, how advanced, how explosive they're getting, those games are now few and far between, even in the Big Ten. Look at Purdue last year. Wisconsin, a couple times against Purdue. You've had to get in a shootout against them. Even teams like Indiana, you got to score some points. Illinois this Saturday, they look a lot more improved on that side of the football. Obviously, they haven't really played anybody close to what I think Wisconsin is, but they're capable of scoring on your defense. Michigan made some big changes to their offense. You're not beating them, Ohio State, Penn State, probably Michigan State too. You're not beating those teams 14-10, 10-7. Those games are gone. So does the Wisconsin way of controlling the clock, trying to grind people down over 4 quarters, does that work? And if it doesn't, is Paul Chryst willing to adapt? Again, I think this staff is capable. I think Chryst is capable. I think he still has a lot of good years left. I don't think he's ever the type of coach that's going to lose a locker room. I don't think he's the type of coach that players aren't going to go to bat for. And a lot of times that's half the battle, if not more. And that's where I'm always hesitant with making drastic changes for a coach who I know has his players' backs and who have his back as well. That kind of culture is hard to build, and I don't think you scrap it until you're absolutely sure that his best days are behind him and he's no longer the right man for the job to take this program forward. I don't know that to be the case yet. Another perspective thing, some of you guys and girls out there, I don't want to come off sounding like a fan, but Paul Chryst is one of your own. Treat him that way. This guy played quarterback here. He bleeds red and white, just like the rest of you. It's one thing to criticize him. It's one thing to want to change at the head coaching position. But some of your comments, you got to remember, he was born and raised here. He's a Badger. He's on your team. This isn't everybody. Most of you are smart enough to get that. But that's not how you treat your own at Wisconsin. Some of you need to be checked a little bit. Don't act like some of these buffoons at other programs. I will say, though, he doesn't do himself any favors in the media. I don't think he cares. And I think that's what drives a lot of people crazy, is that they come off angrier about the loss than he does, and he goes up there with no emotion and says the same thing after every press conference because he just doesn't want to be there. He's different with the team. I'm sure in the locker room, there was probably some anger, probably some desperation, maybe even some tears. I don't know the guy. But I get why fans get so even more ticked off after the game, because he doesn't match their frustration in a clearly frustrating moment. So unless they lose to Illinois or just drop a stunning game here to a lesser opponent, that's probably the last time I'll talk about this. I don't like talking about it. I don't like bringing it up because you're dealing with a human being that I know cares about this place. And like I always say, who the heck am I to tell him how to do his job? He'd do it 10 times better than I ever would. But, that's my job, and sometimes things need to be said. All right, so now we're going to bring on the newest Wisconsin commit, Nolan Winter. He pulled the trigger for the Badgers on Friday. I already gave my breakdown of what I think he'll bring to Wisconsin and his impact on the 2023 and 2024 recruiting classes if you want to check out the previous episode. Also did a little video highlights over the top, so if you want to see some of what he can do on the floor, it's there as well. But before we bring him on here, this was a very heated recruiting battle, and he's going to tell you that. Winter had some other offers, but this was really a Minnesota-Wisconsin battle pretty much the whole way. Dad played for Minnesota. Mom played volleyball at Minnesota. Grew up a huge Gopher fan. Has been going to their camps since he was a little kid. This was not an easy recruitment for Wisconsin to win. Yeah, it helped. He's from Lakeville North, where everyone from Lakeville North or Lakeville, Minnesota goes to Wisconsin, apparently. Yeah, he's a prototypical big man prospect that's could develop similarly to the likes of a John Lure, Nate Reavers, might have a little better guard skills than both of those guys as well. Wisconsin, I mean, he's not Sam Decker in terms of being able to be a true wing, but that's another comparison Wisconsin made with him. Winter is a 3-star prospect by both the 24/7 Sports rankings and the 24/7 Sports composite rankings, but probably has mid 4-star, high 4-star potential. As I mentioned in the last episode, he's still a baby physically. He probably just got done growing, or maybe is still growing. Came up as a guard. His dad's 7 feet tall, probably put on, I think he said 30 or so pounds when he was in college. Put on a lot more when he got to a professional career. Played for the Timberwolves for a little bit, I believe. So we're probably talking about a kid that comes to Wisconsin very raw, but has a chance to make significant jumps over a 4-year period, maybe 5 if he opts to redshirt, which I think is a possibility given his lanky frame. I think talent-wise, he could potentially be someone who's ready to play, but like Nate Reavers, you kind of see it going either way. Maybe if Wisconsin needs him, you just get him out there and deal with some of the headaches of not being strong enough for the Big Ten and hope he catches on. But he's definitely a guy that could use that red shirt year just to add 10, 15 pounds and get ready for the grind. Regardless, Wisconsin put a lot of eggs in this basket, and it wasn't guaranteed whatsoever. I think Nolan will tell you Minnesota was in the driver's seat pretty much the whole way. Also, don't forget, Wisconsin turned down Milan Momcilovic to get this guy, the Pewaukee star, the top 50 prospect. Wisconsin thought his long-term upside was so good that they let a top 50 4-star prospect who would have been a layup for them, they let him go. Not to put any pressure on Nolan if he listens to this, but yeah, I mean, I'm sure he's aware of it. He was at camp with him, and it was Nolan who got the offer. But, obviously this is going to be one to watch closely over the next couple of years just to see how fast he can reach that ceiling and if Wisconsin made the right call. So with that, here is our interview with Wisconsin commit and 3-star forward Nolan Winter. Just to start things off, what were some of the main reasons that Wisconsin won out for you in the end? Obviously, it was a really heated battle between Minnesota and Wisconsin. What just kind of put the Badgers over the top?
Yeah, I think winning, obviously. I want to win, and they have a proven track record of that. Big Ten tournaments, NCAA appearances, all of that, plays a huge factor into my decision. Also, part of me wanted to just kind of do my own thing. Minnesota would be cool to follow my parents' footsteps, but on the other side of it, I kind of wanted to be my own man and start my own life and not kind of follow in my parents' footsteps. So those were the main reasons why I picked Wisconsin over Minnesota. But Minnesota, I'm still going to cheer for them. I love Minnesota. Whatever, the coaches are great. I love the players. I love everything about them. But Wisconsin, I love Wisconsin and everything about it. So.
Yeah, you can tell me if I'm off base, but I kind of describe this recruitment as sort of a battle between your head and your heart. Obviously, wearing the Minnesota colors is going to make you feel some type of way that no other school is going to. Your dad played there, your mom went there, you grew up a fan. But at the same time, you look at Wisconsin and you're kind of the poster boy for what they like to do with their bigs. You're exactly like a lot of the guys that they've brought in over the years and developed. How much was it that type of decision of just, an emotional one versus maybe a business decision for you? Not that there's a right or wrong way to go with it.
Yeah, I had to do what's best for me. I mean, my head like my head and heart were telling me different things, but at the end of the day, it was a business decision, like you said. And as much as it would have been cool to go to Minnesota, follow my parents and whatever, I just felt like Wisconsin was it was calling my name, so I felt like I needed to go there, and I'd have a great career there. So I'm ready to go there. But yeah, it was definitely a really, really tough decision, and I had to give it a lot of thought and prayer throughout the process. But yeah.
What was that call to Minnesota just like? Not that you have to give too many details of what was said in the exchange, but that's a difficult call for even an adult to make, to have to break off a relationship like that. What was that just moment like for you, and how difficult was that to have to tell them no?
Yeah, they were my first offer. They recruited me since day one. So telling them no after a year and a half of building relationships, going to their games, having them travel to almost every game of mine, it was obviously really difficult for me to say no. But like I said, I had to do what's best for me. So I mean, the conversation itself, it was definitely gut wrenching. It was hard for me, but I had to do what I had to do, and I'm glad. I'm not regretting the decision I made, and I'm ready to be a Badger. So
talking to your dad the other day, he kind of gave some insight into the recruitment, and I know he tried to keep his distance as much as possible and not let his Minnesota ties affect you. But he sounded pretty convinced that going into those final official visits, you were going to Minnesota. Is that accurate, or what was the tipping point on that Wisconsin official visit, if you remember, that maybe swung things in your direction or in their direction?
Yeah, so like he said, all throughout this process, I thought I was going to be a gopher. And then I went on my official to Madison this summer, this fall. And I absolutely loved it. I mean, the campus, the vision they had for the program, they had for me, the developmental piece, the players I got along with, the atmosphere of the students, everything about it, like, it just checked all the boxes for me. So right after that, it kind of clicked, and I'm like, all right, this is what I want to do. So then I went to Minnesota just to see if they could, blow me away or whatever. And, it's obviously a great school and all, and I had a great time. And it was really cool to visit there. But at the end of the day, Wisconsin, after the Minnesota visit, I still wanted to go to Wisconsin, and that's how I kind of knew, like, yeah, this is what I'm doing.
What was just the reaction from Coach Gard and Coach Krabenhoff when you told them the news?
Oh, it was awesome. It was awesome. Gard said he was jumping up and down the Kohl Center. They were screaming. There was everything. So, I mean, it was awesome. And then when I posted the commitment post on my Twitter, I FaceTimed them, and it was really cool. They had the whole coaching staff there, and I talked to them for a little bit. It was a really cool experience.
So you are what's expected to be the final member of this 2023 recruiting class. Obviously, things can change, depending on maybe, somebody blows up and, Wisconsin's got that extra scholarship if they want it. But, what do you kind of just think of this class overall from what you know about the guys between Gus Yalden, Jack Janicki, and John Blackwell?
Oh, the potential is through the roof. That's what I think. We have the potential to win a ton of games, go to the tournament, make a run. But, I haven't played against or with John Blackwell yet, but I've talked to him a lot, and he's a great guy. So I'm excited to play with him. Jack Janicki, I've known him since I was 5 years old, and we played on the same AAU team for 10 years. So we already have a relationship in place, and I love playing with him. He's great off the court. He's a great kid. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And then Gus Yalden, I mean, I've seen him all over social media, these last couple of years blowing up. So, I mean, I've seen what he can do. And, I've talked to him a little bit. I'm ready to work with him. He seems like a fun guy. So, yeah, the whole recruiting class, I'm excited. I'm excited to see the potential.
No, nobody's ever had an answer for this, but what is it about Lakeville that all you guys are coming to Wisconsin now? It's Nate Reavers, Tyler Wall, Riley Mahlman. I mean, Wisconsin just never seems to miss in that city. Is there something, does it feel similar to Madison, or can you put your finger on anything as to why that's happening?
Honestly, I think it's just a coincidence. I mean, there's no recruiting from Coach Oxton or anything. But I mean, the only thing I could think of why is it's an easy transition. It's very similar to Lakeville. I mean, but yeah, there's really no answer. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. It's just what it is. So.
Have you been able to talk to Tyler since you committed? Obviously, we'll see if you guys end up playing together, if he uses that extra COVID season. But, if you've talked to him, what did he just kind of have to say about your decision?
I talked to him. He's really excited to play this year. I wish him luck. But, yeah, I mean, he doesn't know if he's going to play next year yet. So we're going to see. But I think it'd be really cool if I got the opportunity to play with him, same high school, whatnot. But yeah, I mean, he was really excited. I talked to him, whatever. He's congratulating me. It was pretty cool.
So now sort of the attention turns to what maybe Wisconsin could get in your state in 2024. And, naturally everyone's eyes go to your high school teammate, Jack Robeson, to potentially keep that Lakeville pipeline open. I know he just said he set his official visit to Wisconsin in October. What's kind of going to be your role in just recruiting him, and what's your relationship with him sort of off the floor?
Yeah, so me and Jack are with each other almost every day. I'm going to do my best to recruit him, obviously. He'd be a great addition to Wisconsin. I'm actually with him. We're at Culver's right now, so literally we're with each other every day. But I mean, yeah, he'd be a great piece of the puzzle to have for future years. So I'm going to do my best to get him to be a Badger, but yeah, and then we got Daniel Freitag, obviously, Pulley. He'd be a great addition as well. So I'm excited to see what turns out.
Yeah, I was going to ask about Dan and then, Jackson McAndrew, too. Do you have any relationship with those two guys?
Yeah, I mean, through Pulley. I mean, practices, traveling with them.
Right.
I talk to them quite a bit on the road and stuff, but when I'm at home, in Lakeville, they live like 50 minutes away from me, so I don't really have a tight personal connection with them like I do with Jack, but no, they're great kids, and I enjoy spending time with them.
I know media and fans will make this a bigger deal than what it is, but, have you gotten your dad any red and white clothing yet? Has he been able to try it on? Has he wrapped his head around it?
Yeah, we're doing all that right now. We're gonna get a flag for our front yard. We're gonna really badger it out. You know what I mean? We're gonna all red and white everything. I gotta get a ton of apparel and stuff for school. So yeah, we're gonna be loaded with the red and white.
So you can sign here in about 2 months or so and make it official. Just what kind of makes you most excited about this decision to lock it up and know you're going to be a Badger here, in a couple months?
Yeah, honestly, I'm just excited to get it over with. This, not that I didn't like being recruited, but these last couple months, it's just kind of been like constant talking with all the coaches, multiple different schools. So I'm excited to get over with. I'm excited to be a Badger. Get to work in the spring, next summer. Grind with the teammates and whatnot, and then I'm ready to go. I'm ready to play next fall. So I'm excited, and I'm looking forward to everything that's coming.
All right, man, that's all I got for you, but definitely appreciate the time again, and congratulations on your decision.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Have a good one.
That'll do it for today's episode. Hopefully you enjoyed my thoughts on what happened in Columbus and that interview with Nolan Winter. We come back later this week. We got to talk Illinois. Brett Bielema coming to town. #Karma. Also got some fiery stuff from media availability on Monday. We'll play some of those clips as well. But until then, we are on podcast vacation. Again, I appreciate you guys tuning in and help getting this thing take off. Hopefully soon we're off YouTube and on the player so you can get it on your phone and we can really get those listens up, but I continue to appreciate you bearing with me. Hopefully, I'm giving you enough content and substance to make it worth the headache of listening on the site through that YouTube player. But overall, just awesome engagement this week. Really appreciate you guys. Obviously, it helps when things aren't going well, right? And you need to come onto the site to vent. But either way, been a really great week, really great month. So I can't thank you guys enough. And we'll be back with another podcast here in a couple days.